later as well. Vanessa, let me welcome you to the program. And of course, questions over who Donald Trump is going to choose in his administration and what effect that is going to have on Middle East policy.
Yeah, not so many questions. If we look at the names that are being touted through mainstream media in the US, of course, those may change. I'm not saying they're written in stone, but it is looking very much as if he's heading towards a Zionist-heavy and Christian Zionist-heavy administration. Now, since Trump's election, Israel has grown in its boldness in conducting genocide in Gaza. Bezalel Smotrich, who's the finance minister, tells authorities to prepare for the West Bank annexation, saying that now that Trump is elected, they feel that they can go forward this. The intensity of bombing in Lebanon has increased exponentially since Trump's election. So it's very clear that the Zionists feel emboldened by his election. So I want to focus a little bit on Syria. And this was an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr. not so long ago with Tucker Carlson. And I just want to focus, he said, Trump and his policies. So let's.
For them. When I was on the plane the other day with President Trump, we were talking about the Mideast, and he took a piece of paper and he drew on it a map of the Mideast with all the nations on it, which most Americans couldn't do.
No.
And then he wrote in each country the troop strength. And he was particularly looking at the border between Syria and Turkey, and he said, we have 500 men on the border of Syria and Turkey, and a little, encampment that was bombed. And he said, there's 750,000 troops in Turkey. There's 250,000 in Syria. If they go up against each other, we're in the middle. And he said to his generals, well, what's going to happen to those 500 men? And his general said to him, they're going to be cannon fodder. And he said, get them out. So we want a president who has that knowledge. He's going to ask those rational questions and then is going to make good decisions for the American public.
Now, there are 28 US military bases in the Northeast, so Kennedy was slightly downplaying that. 900 US military forces, but a number of private contractors. In fact, more than 1,000 private contractors like DynCorp. So this is Kevin Gosztola on X, a journalist who came up with Trump will reportedly name Senator Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State. On Tucker Carlson's show, J.D. Vance said Trump won't hire neocons that refuse to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. But Rubio obviously or absolutely opposed Trump's withdrawal plan and is a neocon war hawk like Liz Cheney. And he goes on in the thread that he put on X. So if we just move to the next slide. So he talks about Waltz, who also opposed Trump's plan to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, calling the plan a Pandora's box for the return of ISIS. ISIS, of course, is a U.S. proxy in Syria. And Waltz co-sponsored legislation with none other than fellow war hawk Liz Cheney to help continue the U.S. military's role in Syria in defiance of Trump. And reportedly, Trump plans to name Republican Mike Waltz as his national security advisor. He's a neocon war hawk who was part of Foundation for Defense of Democracy's John Bolton's think tank. And then, so how I'm looking at how this is playing out at the moment, I believe, if we go on to the next slide, we're looking at basically the Trump administration offering a carrot to President Assad, saying, if you behave, we might withdraw our troops from inside Syria. And at the same time, Israel is producing the stick. So I mentioned 2 weeks ago, Minister Gideon Saar, the message that Israel should convey to the Assad regime in Syria, that he should drop Iran and Hezbollah. And more recently, in a report that was picked up by a number of local media, in this case, if we just move on to the Islamic Republic news agency, Zionist regime threatens to assassinate Assad. So what were they actually talking about? According to Palestinian media, Israel Hayom newspaper quoted regime officials as saying that Assad was informed that if he did not cooperate with Israel in preventing the transfer of weapons from Syria to Lebanon, he will suffer the same fate of Syed Hassan Nasrallah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while at the UN in New York, had ordered the assassination of Nasrallah, who was martyred in an Israeli airstrike on Beirut. And Avigdor Lieberman also issued a similar warning to President Assad, all of them pushing him to drop Iran and Hezbollah. And of course, as I said, Trump now coming in with potentially the carrot to say, if you do this, you comply, we might withdraw our troops from inside Syria. And then various other titles in media. Israel's squeeze on Hezbollah puts pressure on Syria's Assad to pivot away from Iran. This was after Nasrallah's assassination. Israeli media has been pushing the line that there is division between President Assad and his brother Bashar Al Assad, Iran's man in Damascus. And there was actually a drone strike on what was considered to be a villa very much connected to Bashar Al Assad back in late September. And of course, we have to remember that while he initially denied that he wanted to have Trump killed, I think it was in 2019 in an interview, he admitted that he had wanted to assassinate Assad. So this is Trump making that admission to Fox News.
You take to get Soleimani, and is it true that after Assad gassed children for the second time, that it was you that wanted to take out Assad, that you had a good sight on him, and that it was General Mattis who talked you out of it? And if it is true, do you regret not taking him out, being that he's not, because he is a mass murderer?
I would have rather taken him out. I had it all set. Mattis didn't want to do it. Mattis was a highly overrated general, and I let him go. He worked for Obama. He got fired by Obama.
And in addition, of course, the US has been building its Air Force capability in Qatar, in Bahrain for some time. And most recently, in addition to deploying dozens of fighter jets from various types and 6 B-52 strategic bombers in the Middle East region, the US Air Force has deployed F-15E Strike Eagles from the 492nd Fighter Squadron RAF Lakenheath in England in the Middle East. So are we seeing the UK getting involved, as we've been talking about? And then, of course, so you have the carrot and the stick, putting pressure on President Assad to do as he's told. Then the chief of staff of the Saudi armed forces has been in Iran for talks with officials. Saudi Arabia is often used as a kind of negotiating instrument by Israel and the US. What is President Assad's response to all of this? I mean, absolutely what his response was when they were trying to court him prior to the regime change war that began in 2011. He appeared at the special extraordinary summit of the Arab League to discuss the situation in Palestine. So what he says is what we need is decision to use the tools we possess to stop the Zionist massacres. And I'm just going to play a section of his speech.
لن أتحدث عن حقوق الفلسطينيين التاريخية الثابتة وحتمية التمسك بها، أو عن صمود الشعبين اللبناني والفلسطيني وواجبنا في دعمهما العاجل والفوري، ولا عن شرعية المقاومة في كلا البلدين وما جسدته من شرف وكرامة ورقي، وما قدمته من أيقونات بقادتها الشرفاء ومقاتليها الشجعان. لن أتحدث عن نازية المحتلين الصهاينة وجرائمهم وكيانهم المصطنع، ولا عن تحول الغرب من داعم لهذا الكيان وجرائمه منذ قيامه إلى شريك مباشر ومعلن فيها، فهذا لن يضيف شيئا لما يعرفه غالبية العرب والمسلمين وما يعرفه كثيرون غيرهم في العالم اليوم. أما عن قمتنا فمنذ عام مضى التقينا وعبرنا، أدنا واستنكرنا، ومنذ عام والجريمة مستمرة. فهل نلتقي اليوم لكي نستنسخ الماضي الراحل وأحداثه أم لنبدل في مسار المستقبل القادم؟
So effectively, that was the beginning of the very strong message from President Assad, not only to the Arab League summit, where he berated them for literally having done nothing for 1 year, but he then continued without any direct action. We encourage the continuation of the genocide and become indirect partners in it, as we are not dealing with a state in the legal sense, but rather with an outlaw colonial entity. We are not dealing with people in the civilized sense, but rather with herds of settlers who are closer to barbarism than to humanity. He added that it is not correct to say that the problem is the current mindless extremist government and a people terrified of what happened on October the 7th of last year. They are all working with one ideological mind, a mind sick with bloodshed, sick with the illusion of superiority, afflicted with schizophrenia between hating Nazism allegedly and loving it as an organic part of themselves, is what he meant. So an incredibly powerful message from President Assad, as I said, not only in response to what is happening in Palestine and Lebanon, in support of the people of those two countries, but also a message to Israel that has been threatening his life, to the US that is trying to encourage him or incentivize him to comply with their agenda. Quite extraordinary times in Syria right now.
Thank you, Vanessa. Just want to clarify one thing, and that is that RAF Lakenheath, although it does have the RAF on the front, is effectively a US military base in the United Kingdom. So this is where we are going to be seeing US nuclear weapons back on UK soil in the not too distant future as part of the F-35 deployment there. But that is. Sorry, we'll continue to repair perhaps. Vanessa, let me bring you back on. And you've just paid a visit to Beirut. So you were talking about the bombing of Beirut increasing. What did you see when you were there?
Well, first of all, people can go to my Substack to read the full report. But basically, if we just have a look at the map where I just show how before the blue dotted line at the bottom there from Damascus to Beirut is the old route through the border that Israel has now bombed several times, reducing much of the road to craters and rubble, although I've heard that the Syrians are now using golf carts to bring people from one side to the other in defiance of Israel's closure of the road. So now basically I had to go north from Damascus up to Homs, then to Tartus on the eastern coast, and where you can see the no entry sign is where Israel has bombed the old western route from Homs to the border. So in other words, you have to go further north and further west to come south. Following the Tripoli kind of Batroun coastal road down to Beirut. I'll just show, this is just a video showing the coastal route once you enter Lebanon from the Syrian side. Really a pretty route and not particularly busy. It was busier on the way back, I guess, with food trucks and humanitarian aid trucks and refugee cars coming into Syria. 300,000 children have entered Syria since from Lebanon, since Israel started bombing. And basically, I didn't have much time because I was told I should get back to Syria as soon as possible in case Israel bombed again. And but I did manage to go to Dakheh with some friends who were going to check out their house. So this was just a couple of the videos that I managed to take of the devastation. My friend actually said to me, the apartment block that was shown there was 10-story. They were horrified by the number of kind of familiar landmarks that they had grown up with that had been destroyed or heavily damaged. We saw from a distance the crater that had where Sayyid Nasrallah had been assassinated. It was vast and incredibly deep. And of course, when we entered this area, there was a Lebanon army checkpoint who told us that we shouldn't get out of the car, we should wear masks, and we shouldn't open the windows because of the possible risk of depleted uranium dust from many of the strikes in this area. And actually, speaking to locals, they did tell me that initially, after Nasrallah's assassination, they had suffered with the ill effects of the dust, so nausea, diarrhea, and bad stomachs. They drank milk, and after a few days, the effects went away. But the smell is pretty horrible. And literally, I think the day after I left, this was just one of the bombing raids by the Israelis on that area. We can watch that.
يا زهراء يا زهراء يا زهراء يا أبا عبد الله الحسين يا زهراء يا أبا عبد الله.
If somebody asked me what the guy was saying, and he's basically just saying, oh God, I'm not sure what Zara is. But even on my way back, there were 3 attacks on on Syria, one in Homs, one in southern Damascus, and one on Aleppo. So even in those 3 days that I was away, the attacks against Syria by Israel continued.
Vanessa, thank you very much for that. Yes, we will obviously continue reporting as